All right, for some reason, Nate is having me take the honor of introducing our game of the week this week, which is a sequel game. And I know what you're thinking. Sequel games, are those really any good? Can they be good unless they're already planned, like, a trilogy of games? Like you've got your West Kingdom series. I can't really think of any other sequels that exist out there, though I know there are more. Do you think Seven Wonders Duel could be considered a sequel to Seven Wonders?
I don't know what sequel means. Like, it's a re-implementation of the system. It's a different version of the game. Do you want to have an additions conversation again, Cody?
I'd love to have an additions conversation, dude. We can pull that back up.
We're absolutely not going to do that. But
All
we
right.
can call this a sequel, I guess.
Okay.
Spiritual sequel, at least.
Seven Wonders Duel, you're saying?
No. This game.
Well, this game... Okay, just spoiler alert for saying what the game actually is. We're talking about Expeditions today, but here's the thing, Nate. We're not just saying it's a sequel. Like, the title says a sequel to Scythe. So it is a self-proclaimed sequel.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, so that's what I'm throwing at you. Like, if this is a sequel to Scythe, then Seven Wonders Duel, faux show, has to be a sequel to Seven Wonders.
I'll allow it until I think of a reason to deny it.
But I guess there is this rising trend of duel versions out there, because we've got Duelosaur Island, got Splendor Duel, there's Takedo Duo. So, I don't know, maybe a two-player variant doesn't really count as a sequel, as more of a derivative, perhaps.
Derivative, sequel, tomato, potato. I mean, come on, Cody.
Yeah, I'm trying to have a conversation here, dude. You're saying words like tomato and potato.
I thought we were gonna have a conversation about Expeditions, but it's turning into a board banter. What's going on?
Well, we have
here?
to
I'm
establish like what qualifies a sequel or not. Like, does Jamie Stegmaier know what he's talking about?
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, it's at the designer's discretion, right? Or at least the person who's writing the tagline for the game.
Okay, so it's all subjective then.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let me just point out. Maybe you've got some stuff you want to talk about, but. What I was intrigued by is the fact that it says a sequel to Scythe on the front of the box. But not just that, the fact that it says a sequel to Scythe and not the sequel to Scythe. So it's just got me wondering, can we possibly expect more
Is this going to become a
series
trilogy?
to come out? I don't know. I wouldn't really expect the trilogy. I'd wonder if it's more just an open-ended series of games. Because now at the top of the box, I don't know if you noticed, but it says 1920s plus, which is that's like the self-proclaimed name of the Jacob Rosalski universe.
Yeah, right.
Of like that art scheme that he's been working within. So I wonder if this is now like a licensed board game series potentially.
Could be. I mean, I don't know if this. A lot of times on BGG, it'll say like what family it falls into. I don't know if that's.
Oh yeah.
I'm taking a look here. So under the family category, it falls into Game Scythe.
Okay.
As a family, that's being called a family now, and so we have Scythe, My Little Scythe, and Expeditions.
Oh, I forgot about My Little Scythe. I don't. Yeah. That's just a kid's derivative. That doesn't count.
But it's still a sequel, right? Like just as much as a two-player version is a variant kind of.
Well, but that's the thing. I feel like there's a difference between. Now we're having the additions conversation. A difference between sequels and derivatives, because a lot of games out there now have kids versions of them. But I'm not going to say like, hey, if you like. Scythe, you're going to love My Little Scythe. Like, no, this is a different version for kiddos. Okay. As opposed to what we're talking about today. Expeditions definitely is. In the family of Scythe, it's a similar level weight, perhaps, but it's different.
I was going to keep arguing the point, but you brought it back to Expeditions, so let's stay on track.
There you go. There you go.
My point is that, like, Game:Scythe is a family on Board Game Geek, and both Expeditions and Scythe are categorized underneath this. So It has become an overarching kind of thing that overarches.
Be fun to try to get good old Jamie Stegmaier on this podcast and pick his brain about if we can expect more games to come.
He would not tell you.
Or would he?
He wouldn't. All right, Cody. Well, why don't you get a little splaining on?
A little bit of splaining? Okay, well, Expeditions... Yeah, it's like Scythe, but it's not.
You know
That's
what?
the whole game.
This actually reminds me we might have to do a versus episode at some point, huh?
Ooh, Scythe versus Expeditions.
Exactly.
I love that. I think I already mentioned I'm scripting out a video that I'll do that compare the two.
Yeah.
But for those, okay, maybe there's some people out there who are interested in Expeditions but have never played Scythe, or they may have like only played Scythe once. Maybe they're not that familiar with it. So let's just break down Expeditions for Expeditions. Expeditions is an exploration-focused game where it's still basically action selection. You have a couple different actions you can take on each of your turns, but you're going to have to split between those three, cover one of the three available actions, and then take the two remaining actions. On your next turn, you're going to have to move that split. I think you called this an I split, I choose mechanic at one point, which kind of works, but then you're going to have to basically cover up one of the other actions and now take the two remaining actions at that point. It's kind of hard to explain without just looking at it, then it makes a lot more sense. And via those actions, you're going to be moving around this massive hulking mech figurine around this hex grid. And this hex grid is randomized. It's not an actual board. The board is the table, and then you just flip over these hexagons to form the grid for each game.
Also, I'm not sure it's a grid. What's the definition of a grid, Cody? Because to me, grid is squares.
I don't know, dude. Do you want to have a grid conversation now? What makes a grid? You can have a hex grid.
In graphic design, a grid is a structure made up of a series of intersecting straight or curved lines used to structure content.
Or curved. So if curved lines qualify, then hexes have to qualify.
Intersecting straight or curved. Okay, I'll allow it. Continue.
All right. So I'm glad we had that tangent. This is a hex grid with hex pieces on it. And your overall objective for the game, of course, is to get the most points. But the game ends after a player has completed 4 of a number of available objective options. And I think you place your star, your 4th star, and then every player gets 1 remaining turn. Unlike Scythe, where the game ends immediately once you place your final star. But that's sort of the beauty and the magic of the game is you can win even without completing as many objectives as the player that ends the game does. You could maybe place 3 stars, complete 3 objectives, but it just means you've built your engine better. Maybe you've been playing a stall game where you're just kind of taking your time and building up a lot of points so that you're trying to make other people not end the game quick enough.
You could also actually score all 4 objectives, but actually get 0 points for them. That's actually possible. It'd be really stupid, but you could do it.
No, you get a minimum of 5 points per star.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. Have you even played this game, Nate? Come on.
I was just bragging about how we've played it recently. I forgot you get a minimum per star, but you're missing out on a lot of points if you don't put some effort in. Minimum of 5. Right.
But that's one of the contributing factors is there's these quests that you're trying to complete over the course of the game. If you complete a number of those quests, don't confuse quests with objectives. They're different. Quests are these specific little cards that you have. And if you complete a number of 1 to 3 or more of them, you get in a higher scoring bracket for how many objectives you've completed. For those who have played Scythe, this is similar to the popularity track, where the higher your popularity is, you're in a better position to score more points off of everything else you've done in the game. Expeditions is just a little more streamlined in that concept, perhaps. But overall,
go ahead.
That's the Expeditions concept. Have I missed anything of import?
Of import. Well, I was, maybe you have, maybe you haven't. I was going to continue on a thought here, which is that Expeditions also uses the same heart symbol that Scythe uses for basically the same concept within the game. And that's kind of reminiscent of the Garfield games using similar iconography. Now, there's not as much crossover iconography here, but there is some. You've got the map tokens, you've got the hearts. There are some things that are crossover between, as far as the iconography goes. And I like that if we're talking about a series of games, right? I like that we're kind of having some consistency. Not that it necessarily makes the game easier to learn, because it's very minor things, but it's kind of a nice little crossover thing, I think.
Yeah, I like that too. It definitely plays to anyone who's played the previous game. It's like a sequel.
Yeah, I don't even know if I'd say it's like an Easter egg, but it's kind of like a little... Maybe it's laziness, actually. I don't know.
I don't know about that.
Doesn't have to be a positive thing, necessarily.
probably falls in the sequel scheme because the point or the coin symbol is the same thing. I think even the mech symbol is the same, which you don't really see on the board anywhere, but I think maybe it's in the rule book. Yeah, I forget whatever else is a crossover.
Well, along those same lines, the art is also a crossover, and it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I feel like it really comes to life in this game because you have all these different hexes, and the majority of the hex is taken up by a specially designed piece of art for that hex. So the art is really dominating the game here, and I love it. It looks amazing, and it's got kind of this like horror kind of Cthulhu-y, vibe to a lot of it.
Cthulhu-y.
And it's very much in the Rise of Fenris vein. There's a lot of neon stuff happening that's juxtaposed with the very dark backgrounds and bleak winter kind of, and the further you go out into the board, the darker the hexes get and all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting vibe, and I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. I want some movies,
Oh, dang. If that IP could get licensed out, that potentially could be some dope films.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the art is not just on the hexes, it's on all the cards too. You have this big deck. It's not a massive deck, but it's a moderately sized deck with every single card is unique, and it all has unique art, which is always cool when you have a completely unique deck of cards like that.
It is all 100% unique? There's nothing, no copies?
I'm pretty sure. I don't see, with how everything is themed out and schemed, I don't see room for having duplicate cards like that. And I haven't noticed any duplicate cards.
Yep. Okay. You wanna give a few more pros for this here? I'm sure you have a whole list, Cody. I have no doubt.
Yeah, we can officially jump into what we like about the game. I love the mechs. Mechs are cool. They're very large. I did get the Ironclad edition, so these are metal mechs and not the cheapo plastic that comes with the base game.
Wow. Very condescending.
Yeah, and whoever else is going to ask, no, I'm not going to paint them because I cannot paint. If you want to hit me up, though, if you want to, I don't know, fly or drive over to my house and paint these mechs for me, I'd love that. I won't pay you anything.
He won't even reimburse your flight.
Yeah. I might let you be a guest on the show. How about that?
Ooh, wow. Special right there.
Yeah, faux show.
Don't pass this up.
Oh, I'd have to get permission from my co-host, Nate. Nate, how would you feel about that?
Well, they have to paint one of my games, too. So,
Okay. What game? You need to decide in advance. What game do you want painted?
Oh, Gloomhaven.
Oh, that's going to take some time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, the mechs are cool, and they're heavy. And if anyone's looked up any comparison pictures between the Scythe mechs and the Expeditions mechs, you know what I'm talking about. But these are called giant mechs because they are rather giant. It's still miniature, so in that sense, they're small, but they're much bigger than the Scythe mechs, which makes up for the fact that instead of 4 mechs and a character per player, you just have one single mech. There's still less material there overall, I'm sure, and I do kind of miss the variety of stuff that you get with the original Scythe game, but these mechs still do the trick.
Also, they're really just it's just your mover. It's just your placeholder, right?
Yeah.
In Scythe, it's like, okay, we're all on the map, and like there might be some combat, we're vying for position, we're trying to take plots of land from each other, all this stuff, so it's like, here's my mechs coming in to take. And this, it's like, I'm moving my piece, and it happens to be a mech. But I'm not attacking anybody. Yeah. It doesn't really matter, where I am in relation to other people. I can point my guns at you, but it doesn't matter,
These could have been cardboard tokens and would function.
I'm thinking, it could have been Monopoly pieces, like little, like a little Scotty dog or something.
And then your game MSRP drops down like $40.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it would be great to have a segment or a series or something called Megimic or Mechanic.
Okay.
Where I feel like this is something that could qualify. Like, it's to the point where it probably is something of a gimmick, at least in advertising, but I don't care, so it's fine, because they look cool.
Well, I mean, but with any game, there'll be somebody who doesn't care, right? At least somebody at the company that published the game, so...
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I also like all the art. You did mention that. I like the different methods of point generation, Brothaniel. Anything any game that allows you different ways to score points is excellent, but not just different avenues to victory, I guess, but just all sorts of, well, yeah, I guess different avenues to victory, different paths you can approach, different things you can focus on, to the point where every game you play could be a little different. You might try to focus down a certain track this game and then focus down a different track the next game. You kind of realize that, vanquishing, you can get a lot of points off of vanquishing, because every tile that you vanquish, you get 2 points for at the end of the game, which is a decent amount. Every item that you graft or upgrade to graft. I'm pulling some Dune Imperium lingo here now. But every item that you upgrade and attach to your mech, they come with inherent points that we're worth. Where if you're focusing on doing other things in the game, you may not necessarily earn those points.
But you know what's funny?
So, what?
When we played Expeditions, our 4-player game, those two things were the things I focused on, vanquishing and upgrading. And I still lost to you. So...
So Kirsten and I made this interesting mutual agreement when we were playing. We're like, okay, we just kind of want to have fun with this one. We're both going to kind of delay placement of all of our stars to end the game. We just want to get really big scores. And I'll admit that I got a little bit lost in that, and then Kirsten pulled a fast one on me and ended up winning. She got like over 100 points, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, she did really good.
But also, of course, in a 2-player game, points, it's one of these games where points are going to be, there's going to be a lot more going around for everybody to take part in than in a 4-player game.
I don't know if that's going to have much of an impact on Expeditions, though, because the game's going to take longer, but that gives each player an equivalent number of turns to potentially get an equivalent number of points.
No. I'm not saying that the disparity will be larger. I'm saying that the actual points you score will be higher.
No, that's also what I'm saying is I don't know if that's the case necessarily, because Scythe, I think that maybe is more the case because there's more competition for territories, and territories are going to produce points at the end of the game. But this one, everything you're doing is very solo.
It's very solo, but there's... Yeah. I'm thinking at least from a vanquishing perspective.
I guess, yeah, the vanquish tokens are going to be more competitive.
What else is competitive in this game, actually?
Not much.
It is honestly, it's not much. It's more solo than Scythe, for sure.
You can... So here's a spot where it did come up is... What's different... One of the things different between Expeditions and Scythe is that you don't just automatically place an objective star for completing a given objective. You actually have to then be on a space and take a gather action to activate that space to let you place one of your stars.
Right.
Which is it's a little bit different. But what that also means is there are a limited number of spaces in the game that let you do that. So Kirsten, on her turn where she placed her 4th star, she landed on the spot that I needed to go. And I wasn't close enough to any other star to go and complete one. So she actually boxed me out and established a few more points off of that, which is really strong.
All right, well, let's bring it back in before we get too lost here in personal anecdotes.
Well, that's what I'm saying about the game. Is you're talking about the competitive nature. Scythe, obviously, there's actual combats going on. This game is a bit more of a blocking mechanic.
So I was that's one thing I wanted to. This is actually kind of a negative thing, so maybe we'll be all over the place a bit here. But
okay.
I felt like in a 4-player game, that is basically almost the only interaction is how much you kind of block the other people's spots. And I felt like it happened more often than I would have liked in a 4-player game. So what do you think about 4-player and how... I'm guessing obviously it was better at 2, right?
I don't know, dude. I know that your wife, Anna, was kind of complaining that she kept getting blocked by lots of spots. I didn't really notice that the first game that I played. And honestly, I didn't notice that much of a difference between a 4-player game and a 2-player game for competition of spaces. Just because there's so many spaces and your mech speed is always up to 3, so you can get around the board if you need to. Yeah, it may mean you have to pivot, but there's lots of places you can pivot to.
I will say, compared to Scythe, I like having fast mechs. It's like, wow, yeah. I can move a decent chunk across the board in one turn.
Hey, and you turned down that first game. You turned down the mech that gives you a speed of up to 4 because you thought it looked dumb.
I know nothing about the game yet, Cody. And there were instances in that game where I wish I could have moved 4.
I
Okay, back
expect
to
you
the
to know
good.
every aspect of the game before you choose your mech.
Back to the good.
All right.
I like the action selection thing you were talking about, where you have 3 options, but you have to cover one and take the other 2. I like that a lot. I think it's really frustrating. It can be really frustrating, but kind of in a good way, where it's like, well, I kind of want to, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time you want to do all 3. Or at least it wouldn't hurt most of the time to do all 3 unless you want to stay where you are. But then on the flip side is that sometimes it's like, actually, I want to stay on this spot more, like longer than I'm able to, and the game forces you to move after a certain amount of turns. Eventually you can't postpone it any longer. So I think we figured like the longest you could stall would be like 3 rounds before you'd be like forced to move off a territory.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's a good little puzzle. I think it probably takes some plays to really learn how to use it effectively, but I think it's a fun thing.
Definitely a system that is probably masterable, something that has a lot of elements to it that you really have to think about to do well.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
And that just the game in general. I mean, there's so much to explore. Like you were saying, I mean, there's vanquishing other tiles. That's a competitive thing. There's upgrading cards. There's meteors that you can, whatever it is, meld to your mech. There's the exploring aspect. Also, you get rewarded for exploring, and so some people are going to do that more than others. There's so many different things, and then the quests also, and then all these goals you're trying to complete. There's a lot going on, so there's a lot to explore. Also, you play it once and you're like, okay, I feel like I understand I've experienced parts of this game, but I definitely haven't experienced all of it yet, needs more plays.
Yeah. Yeah, in that sense, I like how all the cards are multi-purpose, multi-function as well, because the cards are always going to have a worker spot on them that you can activate, which you will need a specific colored worker, so that's an element in and of itself. But then they all sort of have somewhat different extra functions. So some of the cards, their additional function is once you equip them to your mech, well, they're worth points at the end of the game. I guess that's kind of the main extra function. But then you don't have to place a worker on them to keep their ability going.
Yeah.
Some of them, their ability goes away, but then it gets swapped out for a one-time activation ability, and those are the meteorites. Every time you add another meteorite, you activate all equipped meteorites.
I felt like the upgraded cards had mixed. I felt like in general the upgrades were okay actions, but they weren't incredible. And maybe I made bad choices when I played, and I picked bad upgrades. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of those abilities were mega incredible either, but I think that just overall kind of describes the pace of the game. It's lots of little steps.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe we can actually jump into the dislikes, because that leads me to
go
something
for it.
that I felt. I don't think that the asymmetry was particularly strong in the game. Maybe it's fine for what it was, but coming out of Scythe, all the sides are very different. You have not only your inherent faction ability, but then you have all of your mech abilities that become unlocked. You also have a starting area that's really going to define how you play the game. Whereas this, all you get is a mech, which just has one single ability that isn't particularly game-breaking. And then you're going to get a character and an accompanying companion that have, compared to all the other characters and companions, very slight differences in what they do.
Okay.
So overall, it's not a particularly asymmetric game, and I was a little bit disappointed with that.
From the outset, it isn't, right? But that's the thing. That's what differentiates this from Scythe, is that as this game goes on and goes on and goes on, you're adding so much. You're collecting so many cards. You're building a tableau. You're creating worker spots for yourself. You're adding things to your mech that give you different abilities, right? And so as this game progresses, you become more and more asymmetrical. Whereas in Scythe, it's pretty constant the whole time. Like, you have your mech abilities that you unlock as you get mechs. But in general, everything that is special about you is special about you from the beginning, and not much really changes from inside.
Yeah, I don't know if that really makes it I don't think that qualifies it necessarily as an asymmetric game, though, because you can say that about any engine builder. Any engine builder, you're going to have different abilities that you slowly acquire. I guess my point is that there aren't very many inherent asymmetric abilities.
Yeah, sure. It's not like, oh, I'm playing as this faction. Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. That's fair.
Do you have? I have more dislikes, but I'll let you hit me up with some if you got them.
Yeah, me too. Probably my biggest well, none of them are really big. I have a handful, but they're all pretty tiny things. One is that the game in general, and I've only played it once, the game feels kind of convoluted. Now, it's a pretty big game. There's a lot of different aspects that we talked about. But after one play, it didn't feel harmonious in the way that some other big games do. It didn't feel harmonious like Tapestry does, where it feels like everything just kind of comes together, and as long as you still have to put in effort, it doesn't just happen magically, but like things like just click, they click really well. I didn't experience that in this, and like I said, I've only played it once, definitely needs more plays, and that could definitely change, and obviously this is one of these games that the more you play, the better you're gonna, every single time you play, you're gonna learn more, and you're gonna get better, right? But just from one play, it's kind of like it felt like there was some grinding of the gears in there, Another thing also is, and maybe I would love to hear your opinion on this. I'm wondering about the goals, the star goals. There's like 8 of them or 7 or 8, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Some of them kind of seem like they might be definitely easier than others, like just collecting cards, for example, just collecting 8 cards. Now, granted, that means you can't necessarily be using those. You can still be using them, though. You just can't be attaching them to your mech. But, having 8 cards or just exploring 5 different map tiles don't seem like particularly difficult things compared to some of the other ones.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, some of those might be scalable based on how many players there are, like the one where if you vanquish the 20 level token, that's like only one person can do that. So obviously in a 2-player game, you have something like a 50% chance of doing it, whereas in a 4-player game, you're down to like 25%. And then it's the same for those exploration tokens. In a 4-player game, it's going to be a lot harder to get 5 exploration tokens because everyone's going around the board and exploring.
And
whereas that's going to be a lot easier.
Vanquishing also in general, right? It's like vanquish 7 tokens or something.
Yeah, that's true. I think everyone is still generating like a fair amount of their own personal, obviously, resources that they use to vanquish. So,
but there's less available. Well, but I guess in general there were the same amount available
in every game.
No, but I mean, because there's 4 people, it's more of a actual competitive thing. Yeah,
that's true. If you're trying to get 7 total, that's a good point. So yeah, some are definitely easier than others compared between different player counts in games, but even so, some of them are still easier to get. Like getting the 8 cards, that you just collect some cards and don't do anything with them for a little bit. Just keep playing them before you start attaching them to your mech,
right.
And then you're good to go.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely like attaching cards to your mech. There's 3 different objectives you can complete doing those. That takes a little bit of time.
Well,
but that's the thing is they're rewarding though. They give you more points than just like getting 8 cards is not going to inherently give you any points other than the star itself.
See, but that's the thing, like, adding 4 upgrades to your mech. It's like, okay, well, so you have to spend the time to get 4 cards, and then you have to go back to the action 4 times to upgrade them. It's like, okay, well, that's 8 actions, right? But I need to get 4 upgrade cards. It's not like any card can be upgraded. There's only certain cards that can be upgraded, and then I need to find ones that are actually good for me. That was part of the thing with, like, the first time I played. It was like, half of the upgrade cards that I actually used, like, didn't even help me. But I just was trying to get the upgrade so I could like actually get that star. So I feel like it's almost like, well, maybe you'll get lucky and good ones will come out that actually play into your strategy.
Yeah. I don't think I minded that aspect as much. It just kind of feels a little bit more like play the game that you're given. Just it's a bit more of a pivot game. But I can see how that could be frustrating if you just want good upgrades all the time,
Yeah. Last thing for me, speaking of upgrades, the ironclad mechs and their little silicone stands.
Yeah.
Take it away, Cody.
They didn't work out super well. Apparently, Jamie Stegmaier is aware of this event, and supposedly the manufacturer told him that after a couple of weeks, they should settle and work out well. There are some forums where people recommend you just kind of manually with your hands stretch them out or even heat them up a little bit with like a warm coffee mug or something and then attach them to the mechs. But the thing is, the mechs can't be stored in the box with the tray with those molds on them. You have to remove the molds every time. So you don't necessarily want to like heat a mold to one specific mech each time. Like it's just going to be different. So I don't know. Obviously, I haven't played it enough, only 2 games so far, but we'll have to see over time if those molds kind of like stretch out and work a little bit better. But it is pretty frustrating though when you open up this $100 plus game. I think that's I forget exactly how much it was now. I think it was like $115 from Stonemaier or something for the Ironclad edition. And you pull out all these nice components, and then the differentiating player color thing like won't attach to the mechs. Like that's a little frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And honestly, I imagine it frustrates Jamie as well. I don't know how it happened. I don't know how it got missed. But yeah, and again, it's a tiny thing, you know. But at the same time, it's like, you know, it would be nice. Other games do this well. So
yeah, come on. And I am curious if those silicone grippy thingies work better on the plastic mechs, and maybe it's the metal mechs that's a problem.
No, I think it is.
Yeah, I think so? Okay.
Yeah. Any other negatives for you?
Yeah, I do have a couple more. And let me just preface, I guess, this whole dislikes list with it's given away a little bit of my verdict for Expedition, so that I still think it's dope, but when I think about Scythe, I can't really think of things I dislike about it. And anything I might dislike about Scythe is like very minor or just non-existent. And so Scythe is a 10 out of 10 for me. 10 on the BGG. But with Expeditions, there are a couple things that I was a little frustrated by. So the whole tucking cards concept, I appreciate that the mech boards come with little nubbins you can stick in the bottom of them to elevate them, so it's a little bit easier to tuck cards. But it barely helps. Like it's still kind of a chore trying to maintain your board and get those cards under there. So that's a little frustrating, because that's kind of it's more of a maintenance thing, but it is something that you're doing throughout the game. So if you're constantly kind of annoyed by that, that's going to mess with your game experience. The board being made up of easily movable hexes, I also don't think was super great. Again, I guess it's not actually a board. It's just how the game is set up. But you're moving around the game, you're setting your mechs down. Maybe that doesn't like wiggle the hexes too much, but maybe if you accidentally bump one, that's going to bump all the other hexes, then you have to realign them. And 2/3 of the hexes you're exploring, so you have to land on them and flip them over. And maybe you're trying to flip over a hex that's like touching 3 or 4 other hexes in the middle of the board, then you're going to like bump all of them. So yeah, it was just a little frustrating. I would have preferred some sort of, I don't know, like modular board setup like Scythe was able to do, where you can you have these module elements that make up multiple hexes, and so you just kind of flip them around however you need to. So yeah,
I don't know.
Overall, the game felt a little more mechanically challenged.
I definitely like that there's so much variety, that the hexes can come out in so many different combinations. And I think that's really good, because there's a lot of like a few of them are kind of like, depending on what's next to it, there's different effects, right? They affect things that are next to them, cards that are next to them, other tiles that are next to them, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important that they all be individual. Maybe they were just like, the board's already too big, so we don't want to add like a border around the edge to contain it. You know, I don't know what it was. The good news, though, is that your negative comments are more or less just about the aesthetic components, right?
That's true. I mean, the biggest one I already mentioned earlier, kind of when we transitioned, but it was that the asymmetric nature of the game wasn't very strong.
True.
That's probably the biggest gameplay complaint I would give.
Okay.
But yeah, otherwise they are a little more superficial. But let me throw this last, admittedly very superficial aspect of the game. With the game insert, you can't store it sideways.
You can't store it sideways.
I don't know. Sometimes they fit better that way, you know? Like, you know, it's just how it works.
Like horizontal?
Like you'd flip it over to where if you were to open the box, you'd have to move the lid to the right and the box to the left. Does that make sense?
No. You mean like a book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
like
basically.
A book.
Like a book.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of down on its side. You can't do it that way, because with the insert, the little container, the tray that comes with it, where you put all the coins and the workers and the exploration tokens, that just goes every which way. Like it's not, well, no, it's not sealed at all. Like the whole box has an overall like plastic sleeve that goes over it to, like, I guess, cover all the components. But that individual tray, I wish had some sort of lid so that you could store it any which way you wanted. Again, minor complaint, and it's fine, but it's just another thing I noticed.
Minor thing, but you did dedicate 60 seconds to complaining about it.
Hey, you know, worth mentioning, and it's been mentioned. We can move on now if you want.
Well, verdict.
Maybe
real quickly,
yeah, what you got?
I mean, overall, I think it's good. I don't know if I'd say great. I think it's good. I think it deserves a lot more plays. I said this last week about Fort Gardens. I thought it was an okay game and that it deserves a few more plays. I think this is a very good game and it deserves more than a few more plays. And I would definitely love to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I landed this pretty high in my top hundo. I think it's entered at 16. I'm not sure how it's going to move. My inclination is that it's going to move down, like worsen over time, but we'll just have to see. Beyond that, yeah, I think so. It's just hard to say. It's hard to say. Like you said, I'm gonna need to play it quite a few more times. But that being said, it did land pretty high at 16. That's a good number out of 100. And I did enjoy it. It is a good game. I might even venture to say it's a great game. I know you're a little bit hesitant using great, but I might say that. But we'll just see. We'll see, bro.
Listen, like I said, more plays, all right? More plays, and you can revisit it sometime in the future, Cody, and let us know if this landed as great or if it dropped down to the 20s, 30s, 40s on your list.
Oh, definitely not 30s or 40s. I think the most this would drop is maybe to 20s.
I mean, isn't it great then, right?
Let me look at my list and see where I would define
relatively
greatness.
Is it relatively great? Because I would say anything that falls into the 20s is, I don't know. I think I'd have to use the word, I don't know, like 29. I think I'd have to use, I don't know.
We're going to have to see at the end of the year how my evaluation of my entire list changes, because I'm like looking down the list, like I'm looking at Architects of the West Kingdom at 26. I'm like, is that a great game? It's kind of a pretty good game. But then I go down to 30, Black Angel. I'm like, well, that's a great game. So why is it below Architects? So I don't even know anymore, dude.
Yeah, it needs a little reevaluation.
Yeah, just a little bit.